A white manager humiliates a black woman. The next day, she is shocked when she returns. What could possibly lead her back to the place of her deepest disgrace? What secrets lie behind the cold, scrutinizing gaze of the store manager? Who will stand by her side when the world seems to turn away? How far will she go to reclaim her dignity? And what unexpected twists await her? As the tension mounts and the truth unfolds, will justice finally be served, or will prejudice prevail? The answers await in a story where nothing is as it seems. I had always found joy in choosing gifts for others, especially when the recipient was someone as dear to me as Hannah. She had been my rock through countless highs and lows, and her birthday was the perfect occasion to show her just how much she meant to me. I wanted something that symbolized our enduring friendship, something that would speak to the deep connection we shared. Jewelry seemed the perfect choice, timeless, elegant, and enduring, just like our bond. So on a bright, sunny afternoon, I found myself standing in front of one of the most exclusive jewelry stores in the city. The shimmering gold letters on the glass door read La Bella Joyeria, a place where luxury wasn't just a promise, it was a reality. As I stepped inside, a delicate chime rang out, signaling my entrance. Immediately, I was enveloped in an atmosphere of opulence. The scent of expensive perfume lingered in the air, mingling with the soft strains of classical music that played unobtrusively in the background. The store was pristine, every surface polished to a gleam, and the display cases were filled with necklaces, rings, and bracelets, each piece more exquisite than the last. My eyes were drawn to a case near the back, where a delicate emerald pendant shimmered under the lights. The stone was a deep, vivid green, radiating a warmth that seemed to call to me. I was leaning in for a closer look when I felt it, a gaze that cut through the air like a knife. I looked up and met the cold, scrutinizing eyes of the store manager. She was tall, thin, with sharp features, and perfectly coiffed blonde hair that did nothing to soften the severity of her expression. Her name tag read Victoria Jenkins. Her gaze made me feel like an intruder, someone who didn't belong in a place like this. I could almost hear the unspoken judgment in her eyes, but I brushed it off. I was here for Hannah, and no icy stare was going to deter me from finding the perfect gift for my best friend. As I moved from case to case, admiring the intricate designs, I could feel Victoria's eyes following my every move. It was unsettling, but I focused on the jewelry in front of me, determined not to let her cold demeanor ruin my experience. I hadn't touched anything, only looked, yet the tension in the air was almost palpable, growing thicker with each passing moment. Suddenly, the sharp click of heels against the marble floor announced Victoria's approach. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, her tone as frosty as her gaze. I looked up, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, I'm looking for a birthday gift for a friend. Something elegant, perhaps an emerald or sapphire piece." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly as she glanced me up and down, her skepticism clear. "Those are some very expensive pieces you're considering," she said, her voice dripping with doubt. "I'm aware," I replied calmly. "My friend is very special to me, and I want to find something that reflects that." Her lips curled into a thin smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Feel free to look around," she said, before turning sharply on her heel and walking away, leaving me alone with the mounting unease in the pit of my stomach. I sighed softly, trying to shake off the tension that had settled over me. This wasn't the first time I'd been in a situation where people made assumptions about me based on the color of my skin or the way I dressed, and it probably wouldn't be the last. But I refused to let it ruin my day or my mission. I was here for Hannah, and that was all that mattered. As I continued to browse, I noticed a tall, muscular man in a security uniform positioned a few feet away. He hadn't been there when I first entered the store, and his sudden appearance only added to the discomfort I was already feeling. His presence was a silent, yet blatant, reminder that I was being watched, judged, and measured against some unspoken standard that had nothing to do with who I was as a person. I decided to ignore him too, focusing instead on the emerald pendant that had caught my eye. The deep green stone seemed to glow from within, a perfect reflection of the affection I felt for Hannah. I was about to ask for a closer look when Victoria's voice cut through the air once more. "Excuse me, miss," she called out, her tone sharper, more accusatory than before. I turned to face her, my heart beginning to race. "Yes, I need you to come with me to the back of the store," she said, her eyes cold and unyielding. "Why?" "I haven't done anything wrong," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "We have reason to believe you've taken something," she said, her words slicing through the air like a knife. I was stunned, my mind racing to comprehend what was happening. "That's not true. I haven't taken anything. Please don't make this difficult," she said, nodding to the security guard, who stepped forward to stand beside her. Realizing I had little choice, I reluctantly followed them to a small office at the back of the store. My heart pounded in my chest, the humiliation washing over me as I thought about what was happening. I hadn't stolen anything. I was just trying to buy a gift for my friend. How had things escalated to this? The door to the office closed behind me with a heavy thud, and I was left alone with Victoria and the security guard, whose name tag read Elijah Thompson. I stood there in silence as they began to search through my purse and personal belongings, their expressions cold and detached, as though I were nothing more than a common criminal. I fought back tears of anger and shame, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Is this really necessary?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria didn't even look up as she rifled through my things. "Store policy," she said curtly. Elijah, who had been watching me the entire time, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about," he said, his tone almost condescending. I bit back a retort, knowing it would do no good. This wasn't about what I had or hadn't done. This was about the assumptions they had made about me the moment I walked through the door. After what felt like an eternity, they finally stopped their search, finding nothing, as I knew they would. Victoria handed my purse back to me without a word of apology, her expression unchanged. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. Victoria finally looked at me, her eyes hard and unfeeling. "You're free to go," she said simply, as though this whole ordeal was just another part of her day. I took my purse and left the office, my head held high despite the tears that threatened to spill over. As I walked out of the store, I couldn't help but think of how different things might have been if I didn't look the way I do. The world may have changed in many ways, but moments like these reminded me that some things hadn't changed nearly enough. As I stepped out of the small, stifling office, my heart pounded in my chest. The humiliation I felt was overwhelming. But beneath that was a simmering anger that refused to be ignored. I couldn't believe that in this day and age, I was still being judged by the color of my skin rather than the content of my character. Yet here I was, treated like a criminal in a store where I simply wanted to buy a gift for my best friend. The weight of the experience pressed down on me as I walked back out onto the sales floor, every eye in the store seemingly glued to me. I tried to calm myself, taking deep, measured breaths as I wandered through the store once more, but the stares were unrelenting. The security guard, Elijah Thompson, trailed a few paces behind me, his presence a constant reminder of the way I was being treated. It felt like a weight on my shoulders, the air thick with unspoken judgment. I could almost hear the whispers, the assumptions being made about me without a shred of evidence to support them. My steps brought me back to the display case where the emerald pendant had first caught my eye. The gem sparkled under the lights, its beauty now a painful reminder of the joy I had initially felt when I saw it. I leaned in closer, trying to recapture that initial excitement, but it was impossible to enjoy the moment now. Not after everything that had just happened. Still interested in the pendant, Victoria's cold voice cut through my thoughts, bringing me back to the harsh reality of the situation. I looked up to see her standing a few feet away, her arms crossed and a look of smug satisfaction on her face. The icy tone in her voice made it clear that she wasn't offering assistance. She was continuing her scrutiny, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "I think it would be perfect for my friend." Victoria raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident as she eyed me up and down. "It's quite an expensive item," she said, her tone laced with condescension. "Are you sure it's within your budget?" Her words stung, cutting deeper than I cared to admit, but I refused to let her see how much they affected me. I straightened my posture, my resolve hardening. I wouldn't be here if I couldn't afford it. I shot back, my voice firm. "I'd like to see it up close, please." Victoria hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to honor my request. After what felt like an eternity, she finally unlocked the display case and carefully retrieved the pendant, holding it up for me to see. "Here it is," she said, her voice still dripping with skepticism. "A very fine piece, indeed." I reached out to take the pendant from her, but she didn't hand it over. Instead, she held it just out of my reach, her eyes boring into mine with that same accusatory stare. "Do you need to think about it a bit more?" she asked, clearly implying that she didn't believe I could afford it. I clenched my fists at my sides, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "No," I said firmly. "I'll take it." Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she quickly recovered, her expression hardening once more. "Very well," she said, finally handing me the pendant with a look that said she didn't believe a word I was saying. As I held the delicate piece of jewelry in my hands, I could feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on me. The pendant, which had seemed so beautiful and perfect before, now felt tainted by the ugly reality of the situation. But I wasn't about to let her ruin this moment for me. I would buy the pendant and leave this store with my head held high, no matter how they treated me. "Let's go to the counter, then," Victoria said, her voice now completely devoid of warmth. I followed her to the register, Elijah still lurking nearby like a shadow. Victoria rang up the purchase, the price appearing on the screen in large, bold numbers. It was expensive, no doubt, but I had saved up for this gift, and Hannah was worth every penny. "Would you like to pay with cash or card?" Victoria asked, her tone suggesting she expected me to fumble for an excuse. "Card," I replied, pulling out my credit card and handing it to her. She took the card and examined it closely, as if searching for some flaw, some reason to deny me the purchase. After what felt like an unnecessarily long time, she finally swiped it through the machine and handed it back to me. I waited for the transaction to go through, my heart still pounding. When the receipt finally printed, I breathed a small sigh of relief. I had made it through this ordeal, but the bitter taste of the experience lingered in my mouth. "Thank you," I said curtly as Victoria handed me the small, elegant bag containing the pendant. She didn't respond, merely nodding as if dismissing me from her presence. I turned to leave, not wanting to spend another second in that store. But as I walked away, Elijah's voice stopped me in my tracks. "Ma'am," he called out. I turned to face him, bracing myself for whatever else they might throw at me. "Yes?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "I'm just doing my job," he said quietly, almost as if he were apologizing. I looked at him, searching for some sign of remorse or understanding, but all I saw was a man who had chosen to follow orders without question. "Maybe you should think about what that job entails," I replied, my voice cold and unforgiving. "Because what you just did wasn't right." He didn't respond, simply watching as I turned and walked out of the store, the door closing behind me with a final, definitive chime. The cool air outside the store felt like a relief, but it did little to ease the tension that had settled deep in my chest. Clutching the bag with Hannah's gift, I started to walk away, hoping to put as much distance as possible between myself and that awful place. But before I could get far, Victoria Jenkins's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, stopping me in my tracks. "Excuse me, miss. We need to have a word." Victoria called out, her tone carrying an edge that sent a chill down my spine. I turned slowly to face her and saw that she wasn't alone. The security guard, Elijah Thompson, stood beside her, his expression unreadable, a stark contrast to Victoria's glare, which was filled with suspicion and something darker, something I couldn't quite put my finger on but could feel in my bones. "Is there a problem?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the dread creeping into my thoughts. I already knew what was coming, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. "Yes, there is," Victoria replied coldly. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing as she looked me up and down, assessing me as if I were a threat. "We've been watching you, and it seems you've been acting suspiciously." "Suspiciously," I repeated, incredulous. "I've been browsing your store, just like any other customer." "Perhaps," Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But we've had incidents before, and we need to ensure the safety and security of our merchandise. So, if you wouldn't mind, we'd like you to come with us to the back office for a quick check." Her word hung in the air, and I felt a cold wave of anger and humiliation wash over me. I glanced at Elijah, hoping for a shred of humanity, but his gaze was fixed somewhere over my shoulder, avoiding my eyes. "Are you accusing me of something?" I asked, my voice low and controlled, though inside I was shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. Victoria didn't flinch. "We just need to make sure everything is in order," she said, her tone as sharp as the gleam in her eyes. "If you have nothing to hide, this will only take a moment." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind raced as I tried to process the situation. They were treating me like a criminal, assuming I was guilty without any evidence, without any reason other than the color of my skin. "And what if I refuse?" I asked, standing my ground though every instinct screamed at me to flee. Victoria raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk playing on her lips as if she had anticipated my defiance. "Then we'll have to call the police," she said matter-of-factly, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. "I'm sure you wouldn't want to cause a scene." A scene. The thought of it terrified me. Being dragged out of the store in handcuffs, the looks of judgment from onlookers, the headlines that would follow. I couldn't let that happen. But at the same time, I couldn't believe I was being put in this position, forced to prove my innocence in the face of baseless accusations. I glanced around the store, hoping someone would step in, that someone would see the injustice and speak up. But the other customers were too engrossed in their shopping or too uncomfortable to intervene. The silence was deafening. Realizing I had no choice, I nodded stiffly. "Fine," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Let's get this over with." Victoria's smirk widened, and she gestured for Elijah to lead the way. He still wouldn't meet my eyes as he motioned for me to follow. With a deep breath, I walked behind them, feeling every step like a march toward something I couldn't control. A dark, looming cloud of injustice that threatened to swallow me whole. The back office was small and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour of the sales floor. The walls were lined with security monitors, each screen flickering with various angles of the store. A small desk sat in the corner, cluttered with papers and a computer, while a single chair was positioned in the center of the room, clearly meant for me. "Have a seat," Victoria said, her voice now eerily calm, as if she were in complete control of the situation. I hesitated for a moment before sitting down, clutching the bag with Hannah's gift in my lap like a lifeline. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced myself to appear composed. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. "Empty your pockets, please," Victoria instructed, crossing her arms as she stood over me. Elijah remained by the door, his large frame blocking any chance of escape, though escape seemed impossible now. I did as I was told, placing my phone, wallet, and keys on the desk. Victoria picked each item up, examining them with exaggerated care before setting them back down. The seconds dragged on like hours. "And the bag," she said, nodding toward the gift bag in my hands. My grip tightened on the bag, but I knew there was no point in resisting. Slowly, I handed it over, watching as she rifled through it with the same cold, clinical detachment. She took out the small box with the emerald pendant and opened it, inspecting the contents as if she expected to find something incriminating hidden inside. Satisfied that the pendant was exactly what it appeared to be, a purchased item, she placed it back in the bag. Then, without a word, she motioned for Elijah to search my purse. He approached reluctantly, as if he didn't want to be involved in this any more than I did, but he followed Victoria's orders nonetheless. His hands moved through my belongings with surprising gentleness, though the invasion of my privacy was no less painful. "Nothing," he finally said, his voice almost apologetic as he stepped back. Victoria's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. There was no apology in her gaze, no hint of regret for what she had put me through. Instead, there was only a thinly veiled disdain, as if my innocence only confirmed her worst suspicions. "It seems everything is in order," she said, her tone dismissive, as though the past few minutes hadn't happened at all. "Of course it is," I replied, my voice trembling with the effort to keep my emotions in check. There was never anything out of order in the first place. She ignored my comment, turning to Elijah. "Escort her out." The finality in her words was like a slap in the face. Elijah nodded, and I stood up, grabbing my things with shaking hands. As I walked toward the door, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me, the humiliation and anger threatening to crush me. Before I left the office, I turned back to Victoria, meeting her gaze one last time. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice low but filled with a quiet determination. "You'll regret every second of it." She didn't respond, simply watching as Elijah led me out of the office and back through the store. The glances from the other customers seemed even more judgmental now, their whispers like knives in my back. As I stepped out into the fresh air, the weight of what had happened hit me all at once. I had been treated like a criminal, not because of anything I had done, but because of the color of my skin. The realization was like a punch to the gut, but beneath the pain, a fire was ignited. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I walked down the street, the anger and determination growing with each step. I would make sure they regretted every moment of what they had done to me. I would make sure the world knew that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated. This was far from over. The bright lights of the store seemed even harsher as Elijah led me back to the sales floor. My heart still pounded in my chest, the adrenaline from the confrontation with Victoria surging through my veins. Every step felt like a spotlight was trained on me, exposing my vulnerability, my anger, and the deep sense of betrayal that now clung to me like a second skin. I could feel the eyes of the other customers on me, their gazes heavy with judgment, curiosity, or worse, indifference. It was as if I had been branded with an invisible mark, a label that told everyone around me that I didn't belong. I kept my head high, refusing to let them see how deeply they had wounded me, but inside I was crumbling. The humiliation was suffocating, a cold, relentless weight pressing down on my chest. I could barely breathe as we passed by the jewelry counters, the same ones I had admired so eagerly not long ago. Now they felt like barriers, physical manifestations of the divide that had been placed between me and the world they represented, a world of luxury and privilege that I was clearly not meant to inhabit. The salespeople who had been so eager to assist me earlier now avoided my gaze, their eyes darting away as if they couldn't bear to acknowledge what had just happened. Their silence was deafening, their averted eyes a stark reminder of the hypocrisy that pervaded this place. They had welcomed me with smiles when they thought I was a potential customer, but now that I had been marked as a suspect, they couldn't distance themselves from me fast enough. I tightened my grip on the small bag containing the emerald pendant, the gift I had chosen with such care now feeling like a cruel joke. What should have been a symbol of my love and appreciation for Hannah was now tainted by the ugliness of what had transpired. I couldn't help but wonder how things would have played out if I had been someone else, someone who looked different, someone who fit the mold of what Victoria and her staff considered acceptable. Would they have treated me the same way? Would they have made the same baseless accusations? Or would they have shown me the courtesy and respect that every customer deserves? When we reached the entrance, Elijah finally spoke, his voice low and almost reluctant. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, glancing at me with a look that suggested he was conflicted, perhaps even remorseful for his part in all this. "I was just following orders." I turned to face him, my eyes hard. "Following orders doesn't make it right," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "You had a choice, and you chose to go along with it." He looked away, the guilt evident in his expression, but he said nothing more. His silence, his regret, none of it could undo what had been done. I stepped past him, pushing open the heavy glass door and stepping out into the cool evening air. Outside, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the turmoil that had just unfolded within those gilded walls. It was a surreal contrast, the vibrant energy of the streets clashing with the cold, oppressive atmosphere I had just escaped. As I stood there, the tears I had been holding back finally broke free, spilling down my cheeks in a rush of overwhelming emotion. I wiped them away quickly, not wanting to cry in public, where anyone could see me, but it was too late. The dam had broken, and the tears kept coming, a release of all the hurt, anger, and frustration I had been holding inside. As I tried to compose myself, a woman passing by gave me a sympathetic look. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked gently, her concern genuine. I nodded quickly, not trusting myself to speak. "I'm fine," I managed to choke out, though I knew I was anything but fine. She hesitated for a moment, as if she wanted to say something more, but then nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I knew I had to pull myself together. I couldn't let this break me, even though it felt like a part of me had been shattered beyond repair. I started walking, not really knowing where I was going, just needing to move, to put distance between myself and the store. But no matter how far I went, the memories of what had just happened clung to me, replaying over and over in my mind. Every detail was etched into my brain. Victoria's cold, judgmental gaze, Elijah's reluctant compliance, the way the other customers had looked at me as I was led through the store. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Eventually, I found myself at a small park, a few blocks away. I sat down on a bench, staring blankly at the people passing by, going about their lives, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to demand that the world see what had happened, that it wasn't okay, that it wasn't something I could just brush off and move on from. But instead, I sat there in silence, my anger and humiliation simmering beneath the surface. How could this happen in a place like this? A high-end store in a supposedly progressive city. How could they just assume the worst about me because of how I looked? As I sat there, my phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw Hannah's name on the screen. For a moment, I considered not answering, not wanting to burden her with this, but I knew I couldn't hide what had happened. She deserved to know. "Hey, Hannah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I answered the call. "Sophia, where are you?" Hannah's voice was filled with concern. "I thought you'd be here by now. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, not knowing how to start. How could I explain what had just happened in a way that made sense? How could I put into words the sheer humiliation I felt? "Sophia," she pressed, sensing something was wrong. I'm sorry, Hannah," I finally said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain composed. "Something happened at the store. They accused me of shoplifting." "What?" Hannah's voice rose in shock and anger. "Are you serious? Why? What happened?" I took a deep breath and started to explain, recounting every painful detail. As I spoke, the tears came again, but this time I didn't try to stop them. Hannah listened in silence, but I could hear the fury building in her breathing. "I can't believe this," she said when I finished, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "They had no right to do that to you. No right at all." "I know," I whispered, my throat tight. "But they did it anyway." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Hannah spoke again, her tone resolute. "Sophia, you can't let them get away with this. We can't let them get away with this. You should file a complaint, take legal action. They need to know this isn't okay." "I don't know, Hannah," I said, uncertainty creeping into my voice. "It feels like it's just going to be more trouble." "It's not just about you," she interrupted, her voice firm. "It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. If you don't stand up to them, they'll just keep doing it. We have to fight back." I knew she was right. Deep down, I knew this was bigger than just me, bigger than just one incident. But the thought of going through all that, the legal battles, the public scrutiny, was daunting. "I'll be with you every step of the way," Hannah added, her voice softening. "You don't have to do this alone. We'll fight this together." Her words were like a lifeline, grounding me in the midst of the storm. I realized then that I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me, who would stand by me no matter what. "Okay," I finally said, a sense of resolve settling over me. "Let's do this. Let's fight back." "That's my girl," Hannah said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll make sure they regret ever messing with you." As I hung up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The humiliation and anger were still there, but now they were fueled by something more, a desire for justice, for change. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up to something much bigger, something that had to be confronted. As I walked away from the park, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head on. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After everything that had happened, I knew I couldn't face Hannah without breaking down. She had always been my rock, the one person I could count on no matter what. But how could I tell her that the beautiful moment I had planned for her had been marred by such an ugly, hateful act? How could I explain the humiliation I felt, the anger that simmered just below the surface, threatening to boil over? I took a deep breath and pushed open the door to Hannah's apartment building. My feet felt heavy as I climbed the stairs, each step bringing me closer to the inevitable conversation. The door to her apartment was already ajar when I reached it, the warm glow of the evening light spilling into the hallway, inviting yet somehow foreboding. I knocked gently on the doorframe. "Hannah, it's me. Sophia, come in." Hannah's voice was cheerful, and for a moment, I hesitated. She sounded so happy, so carefree. How could I ruin that? But there was no turning back now. I stepped inside, and there she was, standing in the living room with a big smile on her face. She was holding a glass of wine, her laughter filling the room, bouncing off the walls like a melody I had always cherished. The sight of her brought a lump to my throat. How could she be so calm and joyful when I felt like my world had just been turned upside down? "There you are," Hannah said, walking over to me. She paused when she saw my face, her smile fading. "Sophia, what's wrong?" I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I looked away, blinking back tears, but it was no use. Hannah was already by my side, her hand on my arm, her eyes full of concern. Hey, what happened?" she asked softly, guiding me to the couch. "Talk to me." I sat down, staring at the floor, my thoughts a chaotic mess. I didn't know how to start, how to put into words the pain and humiliation I had just experienced. But Hannah waited patiently, her hand never leaving mine, her presence a quiet reassurance that I wasn't alone. "I went to that store you recommended," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, the one on Fifth Avenue. Did you find something you liked?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light, but I could hear the worry underneath. I nodded, my throat tight. "I found a beautiful necklace. I thought it would be perfect for you." "That's great," she said, though her voice was tinged with confusion. "So, what happened?" I took another deep breath, trying to steady myself. The manager. She thought I was stealing. Hannah's grip on my hand tightened. What? Why would she think that? I shook my head, the tears finally spilling over. Because of how I look, Hannah. Because I'm black. The room was silent for a moment as Hannah processed what I had just said. I could see the anger building in her eyes, her hands clenching into fists. She did what? She accused me of shoplifting and forced me to go into a back room. I continued, my voice trembling. They searched my bag, my pockets, everything. And when they found nothing, she didn't even apologize. She just let me go, like it was nothing. Hannah's face turned red with fury. That's unbelievable. How could she do that to you? This is the 21st century, for God's sake. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, my voice small and wounded. I don't know. I don't know how people like that still exist. It's like she didn't see me as a person. Just a potential criminal. Hannah's anger only grew. We can't let her get away with this, Sophia. We have to do something. I don't want to cause trouble, I said quietly, the weight of the whole experience pressing down on me, making me feel small and powerless. This isn't about causing trouble, Hannah insisted, her voice fierce with determination. This is about standing up for yourself, for what's right. She treated you like that because she thought she could get away with it. We can't let her win. I looked at her, the fire in her eyes, the unyielding resolve. It was exactly what I needed to see, to feel. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. Maybe, with Hannah by my side, I could find the strength to fight back. I don't know if I have the strength to fight this, I admitted, my voice wavering, betraying the fear I had tried so hard to keep at bay. You don't have to do it alone, Hannah said firmly, taking both of my hands in hers. I'm with you, every step of the way. We'll get a lawyer, file a complaint, and make sure that woman never treats anyone like that again. I felt a surge of gratitude and relief, knowing that Hannah was with me, that she believed in me, gave me the strength I didn't know I had. Thank you, Hannah. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, she replied, her voice softening as she pulled me into a hug. We'll get through this together. As I hugged her back, I felt the weight of the day start to lift, just a little. It was still there, the anger and humiliation, but now there was something else. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could turn this awful experience into something positive. Maybe we could make a difference, not just for me, but for others who had faced the same kind of prejudice. When we finally pulled apart, Hannah looked at me with a small, reassuring smile. Let's start by writing everything down, she suggested. Every detail, every word that was said. We'll need it all for the lawyer. I nodded, wiping my eyes. Okay, let's do it. We spent the next hour going over everything that had happened, piece by piece. It was painful to relive it all, but with Hannah by my side, it didn't feel as overwhelming. By the time we were done, I felt a little stronger, a little more ready to face whatever came next. As I got up to leave, Hannah gave me another hug. You're not alone in this, Sophia, she whispered. We're going to make sure they pay for what they did. I nodded, feeling the surge of determination. We will. As I walked out of Hannah's apartment and into the night, I felt a sense of resolve I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just a victim. I was someone who could fight back, who could stand up for myself and others. And with Hannah by my side, I knew we had a chance to make a real difference. The decision to take legal action wasn't one I made lightly. I knew the path ahead would be difficult and emotionally draining, but I couldn't shake the conviction that I had to do something, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been treated like I was, judged and humiliated because of the color of their skin. Hannah and I met with Anna Scott, the civil rights attorney, just days after the incident. Anna came highly recommended by the civil rights group we contacted, and from the moment I met her, I knew we were in good hands. She was a no-nonsense, sharp-witted woman with years of experience handling discrimination cases, and she made it clear that she was ready to fight for me. As we sat in her office, Anna laid out the plan. "We're going to file a lawsuit against the store and the manager personally," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about the racial profiling you experienced, but about holding them accountable for their actions and sending a message that this kind of behavior is unacceptable." I nodded, trying to absorb everything. "What are our chances?" I asked, my voice laced with uncertainty. Anna leaned forward, her eyes locking with mine. "Sophia, you have a strong case. The fact that the manager and the security guard searched you without any evidence, and then failed to apologize or even acknowledge their mistake, speaks volumes. And with the support of the civil rights group, we have the resources and public backing to make this a high-profile case." Hannah, sitting beside me, reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're doing the right thing, Sophia. This is how we make change." I squeezed her hand back, drawing strength from her unwavering support. "I know. I'm just scared. What if people don't believe me? What if they twist everything around?" Anna's expression softened slightly, though her resolve remained firm. "The reality is, the defense will try to discredit you. They'll argue that the store was acting in good faith to protect their merchandise, that the manager was just doing her job. But we'll counter that with the truth. There was no reason for them to suspect you, and their actions were based purely on racial bias." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "We'll need to gather all the evidence we can, witnesses, security footage, anything that can support your claim. It's going to be a battle, but I'm confident we can win." Hannah looked at me, her eyes full of encouragement. "Sophia, you have the truth on your side. And you have us, me, Anna, and the entire civil rights group. We're in this together." I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. "All right," I said, my voice steadying. "Let's do this." The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Anna's team worked tirelessly, combing through every detail, interviewing potential witnesses, and reviewing the store's security footage. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Every time I had to recount what happened, the humiliation and anger resurfaced, but I knew it was necessary. One afternoon, during a break from a particularly grueling meeting, I sat with Hannah in a nearby coffee shop. The weight of everything was pressing down on me, and I needed a moment to breathe. "How are you holding up?" Hannah asked gently, stirring her tea as she watched me with concern. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's hard, Hannah. I knew it would be, but living it day after day, it's draining. I just want this to be over." She nodded, understanding. "I know, but you're doing something important, something that matters. Every time we push forward, we're one step closer to justice." I looked down at my cup, the steam rising in lazy spirals. I keep thinking about how many people this has happened to, and they didn't have the resources or the support to fight back. I want to make sure that changes. "And you are," Hannah said firmly. "You're making a difference, Sophia, and no matter how hard this gets, just remember why you're doing it. We're not just fighting for you, but for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin." Her words gave me strength, reminding me of the bigger picture. This was about more than just me. It was about challenging a system that allowed this kind of discrimination to persist. I looked up at her, grateful for her unwavering belief in me. "Thank you, Hannah," I said softly. "I don't think I could do this without you. You're stronger than you know," she replied with a warm smile. "But I'll be here every step of the way, just in case." As the trial date approached, the pressure intensified. The store had hired a high-powered legal team, and they weren't pulling any punches. They attempted to paint me as overly sensitive, misinterpreting a routine security check as something more sinister. But Anna was prepared for their tactics, and she fought back with a tenacity that left me in awe. One afternoon, after a particularly heated meeting with the opposing counsel, Anna pulled me aside. "They're going to try to wear you down," she warned, her tone serious. "They want you to doubt yourself, to second-guess your decision to fight back. But don't let them get to you. We have a solid case, and they know it. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I won't back down. I can't. Good, she said with a small, encouraging smile. Remember, the truth is on our side. As we walked back into the conference room, I felt a renewed sense of determination. This battle was far from over, but I was ready to see it through to the end. For myself, for Hannah, and for everyone who had ever been judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. This wasn't just a fight for justice, it was a fight for change, and I was ready to take it all the way. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. News of the case had spread, and it seemed everyone had an opinion. As I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Anna, I could feel the weight of all those eyes on me. Some were filled with sympathy, others with skepticism, but most were simply curious. I reminded myself of the importance of what we were doing, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever been unfairly targeted because of their race. Anna leaned over and whispered, "Remember, Sophia, stay calm and tell your truth. That's all you need to do." I nodded, taking a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but I knew this was my moment to speak out, to stand up for myself and for those who couldn't. The trial began with opening statements. The store's lawyers tried to paint Victoria Jenkins and the store as simply being diligent, arguing that their actions were reasonable given the store's history of theft. They downplayed the racial element, insisting that it was all just a misunderstanding. But Anna wasn't having any of it. When it was her turn to speak, she laid out our case clearly and powerfully. "This case is about more than just a misunderstanding," she told the jury. "It's about a woman who was judged and humiliated based solely on the color of her skin. It's about a pattern of behavior that we must confront if we are ever to achieve true equality in our society." As the trial continued, the store's lawyers called Victoria Jenkins to the stand. She looked uncomfortable as she testified, her cool demeanor from our initial encounter replaced by a nervousness she couldn't hide. "Ms. Jenkins," Anna began as she approached the witness stand, "on the day in question, why did you ask the security guard to follow my client?" Victoria shifted in her seat, avoiding eye contact. "I thought she was acting suspiciously," she said, her voice wavering. "And what exactly was suspicious about her behavior?" Anna pressed, her tone measured but firm. Victoria hesitated. She was lingering near the expensive items, and I thought she might be planning to take something. Anna's eyes narrowed slightly. "So you're saying that simply being near expensive items made her suspicious in your eyes?" Victoria stammered. "No, I mean, it's just, we have to be careful. We've had incidents before." Anna paused, letting the courtroom feel the weight of the moment. "And were those previous incidents involving individuals who looked like my client?" Victoria froze, and I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew she was cornered. I don't recall," she finally said, though her voice lacked conviction. Anna nodded, turning to the jury. "No further questions, Your Honor." When it was my turn to testify, I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. I looked out at the jury, their faces a mix of attentiveness and curiosity, and took another deep breath. Anna guided me through my testimony, starting with basic questions about that day. When she asked how I felt when Victoria Jenkins confronted me, my voice faltered slightly. I felt embarrassed, humiliated, I said, my voice shaking. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but the way she looked at me, the way she treated me, it was like she had already decided I was guilty just because of the way I looked. Anna nodded, her expression encouraging. "And when they searched your belongings and found nothing, did Ms. Jenkins offer any sort of apology?" I shook my head, my voice stronger now. "No, she didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge that she might have made a mistake." As I continued to recount the events of that day, I could feel the emotions welling up inside me. The anger, the hurt, the sense of injustice. It all came rushing back. But I held it together, knowing that this was my chance to make a difference. When Anna finished questioning me, the store's lawyer stood up. His approach was colder, more calculated. "Ms. Martinez," he began, "is it possible that you simply misunderstood Ms. Jenkins' intentions? Perhaps she was just doing her job, protecting the store from potential theft." I frowned, choosing my words carefully. I understand that store employees need to be vigilant, but there was nothing I did that should have made her suspect me. I was just shopping like anyone else. He nodded, seemingly unfazed. "But you can't know what was going through her mind, can you? Maybe she was just being cautious." "I know how I was treated," I replied firmly. "And I know it wasn't right." As the trial dragged on, the emotional toll began to weigh heavily on me. Each day in court was a reminder of the humiliation I had endured, and the store's relentless attempts to justify their actions only added to the pain. But I refused to give up. Every time I looked at Hannah, sitting in the gallery, her eyes filled with unwavering support, I found the strength to keep going. One day, after a particularly grueling session, Hannah and I sat in a quiet corner of a cafe, trying to decompress. "They're doing everything they can to twist this," I said, frustration seeping into my voice. "It's like they're trying to make me doubt myself." Hannah reached across the table and took my hand. "I know it's hard, Sophia, but they're scared. They know they're in the wrong, and they're grasping at straws. You're doing amazing. Don't let them get to you." I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. "I'm just so tired, Hannah. I want this to be over." "And it will be," she said with quiet determination. "But not until we see this through to the end. We're almost there. Sophia, just hold on a little longer." Her words gave me the boost I needed to keep fighting. I knew that giving up now would mean letting them win, and I couldn't let that happen. Not for me, and not for anyone else who had ever been in my shoes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the trial reached its conclusion. Both sides presented their closing arguments, and then it was time to wait for the jury's decision. It was the hardest part, sitting in that courtroom, knowing that my future, and the future of so many others, rested in the hands of 12 strangers. When the jury finally returned, the tension in the room was palpable. I held my breath as the foreperson stood and began to read the verdict. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Sofia Martinez." The words washed over me like a wave, and for a moment I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We had won. Justice had been served. Tears filled my eyes as I looked over at Hannah, who was beaming with pride. Anna squeezed my shoulder, her face filled with satisfaction. "You did it, Sophia," she whispered. "We did it." As the courtroom began to empty, I felt a profound sense of relief and vindication. This victory wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, who had ever felt the sting of discrimination. We had fought back, and we had won. And in that moment, I knew that this was just the beginning.